People on the ketogenic diet or low carbohydrate diet, almost everyone now, is advised to take some form of magnesium, particularly magnesium glycinate, because of its bioavailability, right?
Yeah.
Because we all agree now, there's this consensus that our nutrition is deficient in magnesium, right?
Right.
People on a low carbohydrate diet are generally not afraid of salt either. Now, potassium, there is so much information out there, and there doesn't seem to be a consensus on potassium. Why is it that potassium is the tricky one? Why can't everybody agree on whether we need a potassium supplement or not, whether we need to monitor our potassium or not? What is it that makes potassium so tricky?
That is a fantastic question. And I don't also understand why the potassium range goes up so high. It's 3,000 to 4,700 milligrams in the US at least, 3,000 to 4,700 milligrams a day. That's quite high. And I would agree that getting to 4,700 milligrams with food alone, unless you're eating a lot of calories, could be difficult to do, whether you're following low carb or not. It's a lot of potassium. But many people are actually told, people with kidney disease, that they have to stay under 2,000 milligrams. So if you have functioning kidneys, you can definitely go up to about 4,700. But I still think, getting between 2,000 and 3,000 is probably fine. And if you're eating a well-balanced keto diet or low carb diet, you can get within that range easily with meat, fish, avocados very high. Avocados very high in potassium. Nuts are fairly high. As far as supplementing, I don't see a problem with supplementing small amounts. The problem is, like the salt substitute, it's very easy to go over on that, and too much potassium can be dangerous to your heart. So and people who are on certain blood pressure medications and diuretics, they can also have a problem with retaining too much potassium. So I hesitate to recommend supplementing to people unless they're going to do very small amounts, and also depending on the type of medication that they take. Obviously, if they have kidney issues, they have to be careful with potassium and sodium as well. So I personally don't supplement, but I would if I didn't eat avocados and I didn't eat as much meat and fish as I do. I would probably, maybe supplement up to 500 milligrams per day. But that's about all that I would do. I wouldn't do like massive amounts of potassium because I don't see any evidence supporting that, like doing a lot of potassium. And as I said, too high. And then you could actually get into trouble with your heart rhythm. So that's my take on potassium is try to get it all from food. And let's say you really don't have much of an appetite. I would say that's another thing for older people who really don't feel like eating enough. Perhaps they would do well with the potassium supplement just to get them up to the minimum, which I think 2,000 milligrams a day is like a minimum amount that you would want.
Right. So that's the potassium issue.
Yes.
Because all you read out there is, there's no need to supplement, or you have to be very careful if you're diabetic, or talk to your physician, and your physician doesn't understand, of course, nutrition, so they can't advise you on that either. So it just gets very, very confusing.
Oh, so they say for diabetes, you need to be especially careful with
I've read that
supplement?
too. Yes. So for diabetics, maybe because of the kidney issue you mentioned, because of course, if your diabetes is out of control,
right,
kidneys may not be. Maybe, I'm assuming that's the case. Your kidneys will not be functioning optimally.
Right.
And so then there may be an issue. I've been low carb now since 2015. I've never supplemented potassium. And my levels in the lab tests always show normal. Although, of course, I don't know if that's too accurate either. But
I think we're fine, really. I mean, potassium has a lot of functions in the body, helps with fluid regulation, and you definitely need some. But I think that the 4,700 milligram is I'm like, how does anyone get that high? I remember in school, we had to keep, this is back when we were all eating higher carb diets, including me, we had to keep track of everything and then put it into a system to see. And I was nowhere near 4,700. I was probably around 3,000, which is the minimum, the lowest that they say it should be. But I don't. I think being within the twos, somewhere between 2 and 3 should be absolutely fine. And that almost everyone who follows a keto diet that contains meat and leafy green vegetables also have potassium. Mushrooms have potassium. It's found in quite a few foods that are of animal origin and low carb plant foods.
Um, Francisca, I really want to ask about our daily recommendations of each of these vitamins and minerals. Because there's a question of accuracy, right? I mean, how do we know, for example, in the context of someone who's not eating fiber, that can inhibit the absorption of some minerals and vitamins, and we know that. So, or in the context of someone who's not eating sugar, how do we know what is the daily recommendation for that population? We simply don't know. We're assuming that we're fine eating normal, real foods, right? Let's talk about that, because that's an important topic. And when people say, oh, okay, you're missing out on this because you're eating a low carbohydrate diet and you're not eating your bread or, I don't know, pasta or whatever, or fruit, for example. How can I tell them I'm getting enough from the animal source foods and the low carbohydrate vegetables? They're just not convinced.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say we don't know. Those studies haven't been done. But on the other hand, how healthy are you? How are your levels? If they're of concern of any nutrient, like a vitamin C or a vitamin D or any vitamin or mineral, they can test that on you to see if you're deficient. You would also be manifesting some kind of signs of deficiency if you were deficient in vitamin C, if you're deficient in the essential fatty acids or anything. You would definitely be showing signs of deficiency. You wouldn't feel well. Most people who are following a ketogenic or low carb diet feel better. They have more energy. Their blood work looks better than it did previously. So how can they be deficient in nutrients that are needed to, like, let's say, convert energy? There's a lot of cofactors in energy conversion, like magnesium, calcium, and many others. You're getting enough if you don't have symptoms, if you feel well. So as far as what their recommended daily intake should be for people who don't eat sugar, people who don't eat lots of fiber, we just don't know what it is. But I would go based on, the other thing is people didn't have all the lab work that we have now years ago. Mm-hmm. We have so many more things that we can investigate and look at. And I would just say, let's take advantage of those things. And also like the CGM, all of those tools of technology we have to tell us whether we're healthy, how well we're doing, and obviously just going by how you feel. Yeah, that's what I would say in terms of how do we know we're getting enough. I would say just, look at me, see what I'm doing, look at my blood sugar, my control, and overall how healthy my diet is and how whole foods rich it is, how minimized in processed foods it is. And that is, a healthy human diet and should be meeting all of your nutrition needs.
Let's talk about processed foods. You mentioned that. Yeah. That wasn't necessarily the next on my list. I left that in the bottom just if we had time, but you mentioned the processed foods. Now, okay, so processed foods are, there are a lot of keto or keto labeled processed foods out there. Where do you stand with them? How do you view them? I mean, I personally don't use any of them. And I'm not saying there's no need or place for a keto snack bar, for example, in anyone's life. I mean, they may serve a purpose. I haven't needed to use those bars or whatever they may be, but can you still be healthy and use processed or ultra processed keto labeled foods? What do you think?
Okay, so that's another good question. Kind of a loaded question because it depends on the person. I say get most of your nutrition from minimally processed foods, no matter what. If that's all you want to eat, that's great. But there are many people for that is, I don't want to say impossible, but so difficult to do. It's a huge burden for them to not have some processed food at some times. Now, the cleaner the processed keto food, the better. The fewer ingredients, the better. Obviously, no sugar. Um, you know, those sorts of things are going to make a food a better choice for someone. But yes, I think that they can be included. They certainly don't have to be. And if you can do all whole foods, that's great. I think you'll have, overall better results if you do that. But if it makes your life simpler and there many people, we don't know what everyone's day-to-day life is. For some people, it's just going to be impossible. But, a keto meal or treat or something, snack that has protein, fat, very few carbs, and not a ton of ingredients, even if it's processed, is so much better than whatever processed food they were doing before on a high carb diet. It's just mainly sugar, like a Nutri-Grain bar. Yes, people think they're healthy. It has fruit. Maybe it's got 10% fruit, but it's also got a lot of sugar, white flour, you know, unhealthy oils in it. So I would say do the best you can to reduce minimally processed foods. But if you need to have them sometime, I don't feel guilty. I have clients that I work with that do some of those foods and others that stay away from them. Same thing with sweeteners. I don't know if that's coming up. These are all individual things that can be included in small amounts on a keto diet, depending on the person. And, I support people in whatever they feel comfortable doing. And, also check your blood sugar, see how it affects you. How does it affect do you have cravings after you've had this food? Do you feel sick to your stomach after you've had this food? So many other things go into it rather than just saying no processed foods at any time. It really just, there's a lot of things that will depend on.
I like that answer because, I think as coaches, well, in my case, or dietitians in your case, or physicians who are working with patients and with real people, we have to be a little more sympathetic and more helpful, less judgmental, and less prescriptive. Now that's my keyword.
Yeah.
We can't be dogmatic all the time. Eat only this. It doesn't work for everyone. Um, so it's the same for the low carbohydrate diet because you said, 5 grams of carbohydrates or 10 per day or 30. People can be in optimal health at different levels of carbohydrates per day. Same for protein, which many
Yes.
people don't know about because we just want one recommendation for all. It doesn't work that way.
No, it's so individual and there's not one size fits all. You need to find what works best for you. And there's a range for these things. There's a range for protein, there's a range for carbohydrates. You find what works best for you that you can sustain long term. I'll tell you, I personally, I am kind of a vegetable lover and I really like avocados and I like nuts. I couldn't do a 10 gram per day carb diet for any length of time. I could do it for, I've done it before, but long term, I like to have a few more carbs. That works for me. Other people actually feel better when they do less than 10 grams. They don't, so that's great. You can have a well balanced diet doing that. And so can someone who wants to have more carbs as well. As long as it's blood sugar's in good control, insulin levels are under control, you feel well, that's what counts. And same thing for protein. Some people are going to be doing better with a more modest amount, and others can handle quite a bit of protein. Really depends on the person.
And I always say, as we age and life circumstances change, we may find that hey, now we can tolerate a few more nuts, and that's
Yeah.
okay, or
Yes.
we can have those berries and not see the same impact on our blood sugars because overall we're more insulin sensitive now. So I noticed that myself. So where do you stand so we kind of covered carbohydrates and protein, but where do you stand with fats?
Um, I say that you should eat as much fat as you need after you've met your protein needs and make sure your carbs are in line, as much fat as you need to feel satisfied and full. Meet your, your calorie needs. You're going to be hungry if you try to do a low carb diet that's also low fat. But the amount of fat is going to vary. Some people do well with quite a bit of fat. Others find, that they have problems because fat is very concentrated energy source, right? If you're doing a lot of fat, just adding fat because you think you're supposed to, because it's a keto diet, you can run into trouble. It can actually, for people with type 1, I think even cause some insulin resistance to have too much fat at a meal. And for people who are not type 1 but want to lose weight, if you're adding, like several tablespoons of cream cheese to, I don't know, your dessert, or lots and lots of salad dressing, yeah, your blood sugar may not rise too much, but if you're trying to lose weight, that's a lot of extra calories. But I love fat. I think we shouldn't be afraid of it. So the amount that someone should eat is really going to depend on several things.
So what kind of fats are we talking about? Surely not the vegetable oils, right?
Not
So
vegetable oils, natural fats that come with food. So fatty meat, fatty fish, cheese, avocado. Got to keep bringing that up because I love them. Also olives, nuts. So those are foods that come with fat. Eggs as well. And then natural fats, butter, olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, uh, the fat that comes with meat, like tallow, lard. Uh, Maybe I'm missing some, but those are the fats that I can think of off the top of my head.
those are the ones that I have in my kitchen. I don't use the lard, but I do have what we call beef dripping. It's the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Same.
tallow.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's beautiful for frying. If you want to fry some vegetables or something, it gives that brown color.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful
Yes.
fat
And it takes heat well too. That's the one thing
right.
about, like, olive oil doesn't always take heat
No.
very well. Olive oil is wonderful for drizzling over a salad, or eating with olives. But yes, you want to make sure you're cooking with heat stable oils, and yeah, that's important.
Francisca, you mentioned the insulin resistance earlier
Mhm.
on, that some type 1s may notice when they're having too much fat. So I have an experiment I'd like to share along those lines. But for anyone who's not familiar with insulin resistance, what is it and what causes it primarily?
Well, insulin resistant just means that insulin, which is an extremely important hormone that allows blood sugar to get from the blood into your cells, um, insulin usually is the key that unlocks the door to the cell. In insulin resistance, that system is not working well. You have insulin, but it's not responding. The cell is not responding to it. So in someone without type 1, more insulin is produced. In someone with type 1, the blood sugars remain high because the insulin it's just the cells are not responding to the insulin the way that they should. That's basically what insulin resistance is. And having very high insulin levels causes more insulin resistance. It's called hyperinsulinemia. So
Mm.
just having those high level of insulin, it actually perpetuates insulin resistance. They kind of, it's a cycle. Yeah.
So what foods are really bad choices if you have insulin resistance or high insulin levels? So if your fasting insulin, say, is, I don't know, 20, so that's
Mm-hmm.
high fasting insulin levels. So you probably have a condition called hyperinsulinemia. Your body's running
Right.
on high levels of insulin. What foods are the primary cause of hyperinsulinemia?
Well, foods that raise blood sugar, like carbs, sugar, also fructose, which doesn't raise blood sugar but does cause increased insulin. But fructose is part of sugar molecule. It's glucose and fructose together, table sugar. So anything sugary, but also anything carby, even if there's no sugar, because those break down to sugar. So anything that causes blood sugar to rise also causes insulin to rise. So if you're sitting at a high insulin level and you eat carbs, it's going to raise your blood sugar and just increase. Your pancreas is going to produce even more insulin. So you were already at a high level fasting. Now it's gone way up in the postprandial period.
Well, so my story about so for a few years, up until very recently, a few months ago, I was eating one meal a day, and that was fine. So in that one meal, I was trying to eat a large amount of protein, and moderating the fat. Obviously, carbs are always stable, like they're super, super low, maybe less than 10 grams, if that. Sometimes I just leave the carbs. Basically, I leave the plant foods out. So I only eat the eggs and, I don't know, yogurt maybe, or Greek yogurt or something with it. But so for a few years, I was doing that, right? And now, in the last few months, I switched to 2 meals. So now that protein, which is always the focus of my meals, is divided into 2 meals, rather than I'm eating the same amount of protein, but rather than in one meal, I'm eating it over 2 meals. But I kept the carbs exactly the same. I increased the fat. I'm having more fat in each of my plates. I just wanted to see if it would cause insulin resistance somehow. I've been doing it for 3 months now. Or if I would put on weight. So no weight gain after 3 months. I can tell, I would notice it because I'm just such a small, I have a small frame. So I very, very easily notice a gram of fat, especially in the stomach area. So no weight gain. My insulin needs haven't changed. They haven't increased. And that would be an alarming sign that, hey, I'm eating more fat. So I'm requiring more insulin. My insulin requirement's the same. Now, the major difference is with one large sort of bolus of protein, I was seeing a dramatic increase in blood sugars. So I'm no longer seeing that because the protein is now divided into two smaller meals. So I'm not seeing that rise. What I am seeing, though, is that my basal blood sugars are kind of slightly higher than before. Whereas before, I would run at 85 or 88. That would be my basal. Now I'm at 95, even 100. It just stays like that. I'm pretty sure that's the excess fat because my blood sugars aren't coming. But then I don't have the fluctuations at all. I just don't have that rise from protein because the protein portion is smaller. So it's a fascinating thing to observe. I love my life with type 1 diabetes. I love experimenting and learning and seeing what happens.
That is so cool. I'm really happy to hear about that experiment. And do you like eating twice a day more than once? Do you prefer it?
I do. Although I haven't yet decided if I should worry about the higher blood sugars. With absolutely no fluctuations, I'm like staying the same all day long. I don't just turn up because, of course, we know that fat will. They used to tell us even on carby days when I was a carb eater, my diabetes nurse, for example, would tell me, hey, if you eat more fat with it, with your, I don't know, pasta, like put a big dollop of what did she, or butter over it. And then the butter would obviously stunt that blood sugar rise. I knew that about fat. So I'm not seeing those rises at all now, but my basal blood sugar sort of is
higher.
So yeah. I'm not decided yet if I will stick with this, but it's good to see and make an observation and see what's happening on me. But no weight gain, which is interesting because I've increased the fat, carbs the same, protein amount is the same, but no weight gain. Exercise is the same too. Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm somehow using those. I must be using that energy.
That is so interesting because someone would say, well, that kind of disproves calories in, calories out, because your calories have increased, but your weight has not increased, right? Your calories have increased just with the added fat, but everything else has remained the same. It's just that the meals are now divided into 2 instead of 1, but you're getting some more calories in because everything else has remained the same. So that's really interesting. And I also think that people with type 1 respond differently. Some people, may have seen something different, maybe because I have heard from other people with type 1, not everyone, that having, more fat at their meals does make their blood sugar stay up higher, that once it rises, it stays up higher longer. But that's not the case with you. And I do think type 1 is very individual.
Well, but that is the case, Francisca. But that is the case. So my blood sugars are staying higher, but consistently at the same level. So it's kind of
right, but your basal is higher. So you're not really, yeah. But I've heard from some people who have like a not a spike exactly, but higher blood sugar remaining, like it lasts longer before it goes back down to their baseline. So I think it just really depends. And also I've talked to people with type 1 who respond differently to fiber. Some people count fiber as digestible carbs and others don't. And, you just have to find out what works best for you. And that way you just kind of learn about your body, your own response to insulin and food, as a type 1 and as well as a type 2. It's just different things to learn because you're not giving yourself insulin. Most type 2s, if they're following a low carb diet, most people with type 2 are not taking insulin anymore. Yeah.
Well, fiber is another interesting nutrient topic. Interesting topic. Now, is fiber a nutrient and is it essential?
It's not essential. It's not one of the macronutrients. It's a nutrient of type, but it's not essential. Some people will find health benefits from fiber. Other people will find health benefits from reducing their fiber. So it's individual, but it's not an essential nutrient, no.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's the fiber covered. We've been talking for over an hour.
It's gone so quickly.
It's gone very quickly. So let's finish up with 2 basic questions I have on my list, Francisca. So why does the low carbohydrate diet work for most people, diabetic or not?
Why does it work?
Why does it work? What's so magical about it?
It works by, keeping the carbs low, keeps your blood sugar and insulin levels low. That keeps your hunger levels, it helps to control your hunger, helps to increase satiety. You can go longer without eating, which helps with weight loss. The insulin levels being lower helps with every portion of your body. High insulin levels are dangerous, whether it's injected insulin to cover carbs when you're a type 1 or insulin that your own body produces. High levels of insulin are inflammatory. They're dangerous. So a low carb diet reduces insulin levels dramatically and blood sugar levels. So it works for those reasons. It can also treat some other conditions of insulin resistance, like polycystic ovary syndrome, again, by regulating that insulin. A lot of it has to do with the insulin, and it's the blood sugar and insulin combined. And no other diet has such dramatic results on those, glucose and insulin. Yeah.
So who is it for? It's obviously not just for diabetics. People are raising their babies on a lower carbohydrate diet.
Right.
So who is it for? If you're elderly, for example, would it still work for you?
Yes, absolutely. It can work for you as an elderly person. Again, you're going to have some different needs based on, there's people who are 90 years old who are extremely healthy. There's people who are 70 years old who have a lot of chronic medical conditions. So it probably needs some adjustments. You also don't absorb protein as well when you get older. So you'll need to increase your protein actually. Older people have lower appetites. So just need to make sure that they're meeting their essential nutrition needs and getting the protein that they need. But that's true for every older person, whether they're following low carb or not. They should all be prioritizing protein as they get older. But yes, older people can do it. There's almost no one that should not do it. There are a few genetic conditions that are diagnosed in early childhood that should not do a ketogenic diet because they can't process fats correctly. But these are identified very early on. But for just about everybody else, you can do a low carb or keto diet. And it's beneficial for everyone. For some people, it can make a huge difference in your health. For other people, there are some metabolically healthy people out there who, it may not change their markers that much, but I can almost guarantee they're going to feel better. They're definitely not going to get as hungry in between meals. And I think that it is an anti-aging diet because you don't have the glucose and insulin spikes. You're eating, naturally nutritious food, and you have a better quality of life. You feel better. You're going to move more, move easier. So I think it's great for everyone. I understand that not everyone wants to do it, so I don't push it. But anyone who ever wants to talk to me about it, I will tell them about all the benefits and tell them to just try it and give it a few weeks. Don't base it on the first few days because that might not be so pleasant. But after you've adapted to it, I think you feel great. Most people feel absolutely wonderful on it.
Is this what you mean by the beauty part of
my book?
Yes,
I do. I mean, inside and out, I really do. I think, I think it can help you look and feel your best as you get older. And I just had a birthday, and I'm getting older, and I feel great, and I feel like I feel like I look and feel better than I would have if I hadn't found low carb, I guess 12 years ago, almost 13 years. Yeah.
This is what I hear almost from everyone. I look at my photos from when I was 30 and I'm 50 now.
Yeah.
I look better now. I look healthier. I look more radiant.
Healthier. Yes. And I feel the same. So since you revealed your age, I will reveal mine. So I just turned 57. So I know as 50 plus, it's like if you can, be happy with the way you look and feel at this age, that's huge. And 50 is a big one. I had a lot of friends that were very, upset about turning 50, but you'd found low carb before 50, and so did I. And that makes a huge difference in the way, getting older. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel better now than I did at 30. Okay, so it works for the elderly, obviously, with a few tweaks, prioritizing the protein. How about children? Surely children need carbohydrates to grow.
No, absolutely, absolutely not. And the Type 1 Grit group on Facebook is a wonderful example of that. R.D. Dykman's son, who developed Type 1 diabetes, I think he was 10 or 11, and he's now in college. And you would not, there's no one fitter, in better shape, and healthier than that, that young man. And he was, raised on carbs. I mean, on low carb from the time he was 10 or 11 years old on. So no, children do not they need essential nutrients. And as we talked about before, a low carb diet provides essential nutrients. They do not need carbs. They need adequate protein for growth and the vitamins and minerals that are essential. And they need calories, but you can get all of those things without eating carbs.
Mm-hmm. So the low carbohydrate diet works pretty much for everyone out there.
Right. Yep.
Is there a benefit in, this channel is called Low Carb and Fasting. Is there a benefit in fasting? Say, even if it's a short thing, like fasting for 12 hours per day, basically not snacking just before bed and not running to the kitchen first thing as you wake up, or not getting up middle of the night and eating. So
snack.
What are the benefits?
Absolutely. Going for, at least 12 hours without eating, it allows your body to rest and restore. It's a time when your body isn't processing any food. Your insulin levels drop even lower while you're not eating. Every time you eat, even if it's healthy, low carb food, insulin levels are going to rise somewhat. They're not going to rise if you're sleeping, or even after you get up if you're not eating. So I'm not a big faster myself. I do about 12-hour fasts every day, and that's it. Occasionally longer, but not too much. Other people really enjoy the way they feel fasted. As long as you're eating enough food at the times you're eating, then that's fine. If you are eating, big meals that contain plenty of protein and your other essential nutrients, then that's absolutely fine. If you're, obviously, if you're fasting and then you're not eating enough on the days you're not fasting, you can run into trouble. But yeah, fasting is great. And I think 12-hour fasts overnight are really wonderful for your body to, do all the repair work. You put a lot of demand on your body when you eat and doing things every day. You just need to give it some time to kind of reset.
Mm-hmm. Similar to turning the car engine off, right? And just
Yes,
turn it off and
turn it off.
yeah, turn it off. Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion, Francisca. I can't thank you enough. And a happy belated birthday. I know I've wrote to you on Facebook too.
On Facebook, yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Neri. This is really nice talking to you. And thank you for all that you're doing to spread the message of low carb for people with type 1, type 2, and just everyone who can benefit from this way of eating.
Absolutely, everyone will benefit. So I will put Francisca's links below. Please follow her channel, buy her book on Amazon, and support Francisca in her work. Bye for now.